Learn how to play Deep Space D-6 Armada. Come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome to Show Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at the game of Deep Space D-6 Armada. Now in this video I'm planning on teaching you how to play the game itself, but if you just want a quick overview, want to see an actual sample gameplay, or find my final opinion and my review of the game, check out the videos in the series. Again, this is just going to be a complete tutorial video. Now before we go anything, one important thing I need to cover for you is that this is a game that does have lots of errors in it. There's errors in the components, there's errors in the rule books, and the rule book is a little bit shaky. So what I did is I did my due diligence to go on Board Game Geek, go on the publisher's website and various different resources to make sure that I'm playing this game as 100% accurately as possible. To add to that though, there is actually an FAQ that's available for the game that actually changes the rules for the game, and actually, in my opinion, makes it a better game. Kind of fixes a couple loopholes and, well, prevents a very strong slide that the game had where it just got easier and easier and easier because there's actually a couple different rule changes for the game. Why I'm saying this is because if you're watching this tutorial video and there's things that don't make sense or don't match up in the rulebook, there's a very good reason for it. It's probably because the rules have changed. You need to get the most updated version of the rules. That's called the FAQ DX, like Delta X-ray. Now I have it printed out right here, and the biggest things you're going to see is our actual new rules for maximum crew size, changes for the planning phase. It wasn't really more of a change, more of a clarification because the rule was a little bit shaky on it. And then finally how the game is going to be won and also how you're going to lose the game is just a little bit different. So this is a really important document you want to make sure you find, get a copy of, download, and throw it in the box. But luckily this tutorial video is going to cover exactly the changes that this FAQ actually brings to the game itself. Also, the other important thing to understand is in this video I'm going to use the terms player and ships pretty much interchangeably. Basically, this is a fully cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and when you play the game as one player game, you play the game with one ship or you can play it with multiple different ships. So the rules are broken down with how many ships are actually in the game. So one player can play 1 ship, 2 ships, all the way up to 4 ships if you want a little bit extra chaos or whatever you want. But even a 2-player game, each person can control 2 ships or however you want to do it. Basically, the rules say there's 1 to 4 ships involved in the game, and the amount of ships in the game is going to change the setup, and it's going to change a couple of different things, including the rules, because there's also different things that are going to be affected for the pure solo rules. And I mean by pure solo when you're only using 1 ship, not solo as 1 player using multiple ships. Again, there's a little bit of differences in those rules. That's enough of that. Let's go ahead and go into setup and teach you exactly how to play Deep Space D-6 Armada. The first thing you need to do when you're playing Deep Space D-6 Armada, and I'm probably going to tongue twist this at least once, so I'm just going to call it Deep Space D-6 or just the game. But the most important thing you need to understand is there's a couple components that you need to pull out. They're only going to be used in the game depending on what ending you have for the game. Now, a really cool thing about this game is the game does have multiple different endings for it, and the ending you're going to get is going to be factored in by various different random things that are going to occur. Basically, as you're playing this game, various different events are going to occur, and the order these events come out is going to judge what ending you're going to get, especially if you're successful in completing some of these events. Now, since multiple of these events can be on the board at the same time, you can kind of control what ending you have because specific events are tied to specific endings. So if you have 5 different events on the board, you pick which 2 of those 5 events you want to conquer to go ahead and bring out what specific ending you want. Basically what I'm saying is there's some ending requirements that are going to be based on whatever ending you get, and that's going to require you to have some extra card stocks right here. These are double-sided, some extra possible card decks, and some extra components. When you're starting off the game, just go ahead and remove these, put them off to the side, put them back in the box. You won't need them until we figure out exactly what ending we're going to have. Next up, each player is going to need a dual layer player board, and every one of these player boards is going to be slightly different depending on what ship you're playing. The game does come with 6 different ships. They all have their own special powers, and they're all going to play slightly differently. Some are a little more tanky, some of them do a little more damage, some of them have special abilities to travel across the board. You get the idea, but they all are going to break the rules just a little bit and add some asymmetry to the game, and also add to the replay value, because again, there's only up to 4 players or 4 ships allowed in the game, but the game does come with 6 different ships itself. So the very first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to match out which one of the holes and which one of the ship tokens come with your specific ship. They're all different sized because these ships have different hull and shield values. But you're going to place this in here and you're going to slide it all the way to the right. There is an upgrade that you can get that can remove these and give you extra shields and extra hull, but again, it's going to be different for every single ship. For example, you see the Pathfinder here starts with 4 shields and 4 hull, while the pale Valkyrie right here starts with only 2 shields and 4 hull. Of course, if you get the upgrades, you can get a little bit better off, but at the start of the game, you need to make sure you're matching up the correct little inserts right here with your correct ship. Additionally, if you're playing the true solo rules, and I mean true solo where you're playing only with one ship only, doesn't matter which ship you're going to use, you're only going to use the solo shield and the solo hull, meaning that your ship is going to start off with a couple more shield power and a little bit more hull strength. Now, generally speaking, your hull and your shields are going to be basically what it takes to go ahead and survive. As you take damage in the game, you're going to take damage to your shields and to your hull. The nice thing about your shields is your shields regenerate every single combat. Your hull doesn't regenerate, it has to actually be repaired. So that's kind of a nice thing to understand about the game. And not only that, every single ship is going to come with a ship token right here. And this ship token is double-sided. As long as you have at least 1 point of hull left over, your ship is going to be on the normal undamaged side. As soon as your hull is brought down to 0, you're going to flip your token over to your critical side, and you're going to leave it at the critical side until you completely repair your hull. Not just repair 1 point of hull, you need to repair your hull completely all the way back up before you flip your ship back over to its unrepaired side. Now again, like I said, this is a game where we're trying to play cooperatively, and the basic idea of the game is we're trying to defeat an evil federation. If we defeat the evil federation, we're going to win the game, but if one of a couple different end game conditions come across, we're actually going to lose the game. The first way we can lose the game is if every single ship in play happens to be in the critical status. Now I showed you a minute ago what the critical versus non-critical status for all the ships is, but you can have multiple ships in the critical status as long as you have one player who has not reached critical. Once all the players on the critical status, all the players are going to lose, unless you happen to be playing the solo rules. In the solo rules, there is a rebuild card that you will start off every single time you play the game, and you'll start with this card, and you can use it to instantly rebuild your ship when it goes into the critical status. It tells you the rules on how to use the card. Additionally, you can also repurchase this card at a later date on future rounds by spending your credits to go ahead and repair that card. As long as you have a repaired non-broken version of that card, you can keep using it every time you go critical, but that's only for the one player, true solo, one ship only rules. Now, the way players are going to win the game is they're going to go and do these away missions here. And as we complete these away missions, certain away missions are assigned to certain data chips right here. Once we get the second data chip, we're going to turn to the page in the rule book which tells us specifically what ending is going to occur. And then we're going to set up the final ending. We're going to try to defeat that final ending. And if we do as a group or as a solo, however we happen to be playing the game, if we manage to defeat that final ending, we're going to be the grand winners of the game. But if there ever comes a time when all players' ships in play are currently in the critical status, or if there's ever any one single plan that has 5 distress beacons on it, once the 5th distress beacon has been added to any singular planet, now again, these can be spread out and we're fine, but once we add the 5th one to any single planet, our players have lost. So the basic idea is we're trying to defeat the evil federation by getting one specific endings and defeating that ending before we have 5 distress beacons on a planet or all of our ships go into the critical status and we lose the game as a cooperative group game. At the start of every game, every single player is going to get a dual layered shipboard, and every single player gets to pick their own shipboard. You can pick these out however you like. Remember, this is an asymmetric game, so every one of the ships are going to play differently. But once every single player has picked out their ship that they're going to get, they're also going to get their ship token. Again, this is double-sided non-critical and their critical side. We're going to start with our non-critical side. We're going to start with our shields signifying the highest current value available to our shields, and we're going to start with our hull also signifying our highest starting value. So for example, the Pathfinder we know starts with 4 shields and also starts with 4 hull. Now the basic flow of the game is that shields and hull are your basic hit points for the game. Your shield is generally going to deplete before your hull, but there's ways that are going to work around that. Different kind of weapons are going to do different kinds of damage. But your shields are always going to repair after every single fight. Your hull itself has to actually be repaired through a repair action. Like I said, if your hull ever goes all the way down to 0, you're immediately going to put your ship into the critical status. Additionally, every single ship is going to come with slots for all these different modules. Now, the basic start of the game, every one of our ships is going to start with some blank modules, and we're going to start with some modules that are always in play for our ship. Now, these modules can be covered up and replaced, or we can actually add modules onto our ship that's going to give us different powers. For example, we may add Orchid missiles onto our ship. We may add a Blossom weapon system. We could add some Hellbore missiles to our ship. And again, we can always replace other things that happen to be on our ship. Once these modules cover up other different things, that basically means the underneath module is no longer longer accessible. Luckily, we can always switch around the modules in our ships, even take modules off, put modules on, and we can even keep extra modules in our backup supply. For example, if we don't want that module on our ship right now, because we prefer that to be in play, that is an option that we can do. I'll explain how we can all do that during one of the phases of the game. But all these different modules are going to give us different special powers, and they're going to require a certain dice be rolled to go ahead and activate those powers. Now, we're all going to start the game with a crew of exactly 5 dice, and we're going to be able to add more dice onto our crew as we play the game through hiring different heroes and everything like that. But these crew members are going to have different dice faces that are going to allow us to activate different powers on some of these different modules. For example, to activate this energy, I need to assign at least 1 die to this one, and that's going to give us 1 energy point of damage. If I wanted to go ahead and activate this shield, well, I couldn't activate that shield because none of my crew shows that side, but if I happen to roll that side, I can definitely assign that 1 shield right there. Now, if you ever look at a symbol right here, and if the symbol is not in a box, we can just keep assigning dice to that ability as many times as we want, as long as we have dice that can be assigned to it that show the proper phase. But if we have any kind of module or anything like that that shows a symbol inside a square, that means we can only assign a maximum amount of dice to that based on how many symbols have to be in that square. So for example here, this weapon system right here can only be activated 1 time because there's a box around that symbol. So that's a very important thing to understand about the modules. Additionally, when it comes to combat, there's 3 different kinds of weapon damage that exist in the game. You have kinetic damage, which is always applied to the hull itself. Yes, the bad guys can get kinetic damage. You have energy damage, which must completely deplete all the shields before we're going to start doing damage to the hull. And then you have ion damage, which can only do damage to the shield. So if you happen to be hit by ion weapons, your shields are at 0 and your hull happens to be full, you're not going to take any damage because ion weapons do damage to the shields only. Now, additionally, along the side right here, we can keep extra modules that we don't have as part of our away teams. We can keep extra crew over here who are not part of our current away teams or anything like that. I'll explain why that's important when we get to the combat and also to the away missions, because there's a max amount of crew we can take on our combats and our away missions. Any extra crew beyond that are going to be put off to our side. Our money can be kept over here. Additionally, we're going to put units that go into the infirmary down here, and our extra crew that's rated to be assigned for our various different away missions and our combats are going to be put in a pool right here. Remember, there's a maximum amount we can ever have for any combats or any away missions. Any extras are going to go off to the side right over here. So basically, the breakdown here is in cargo, the crew over here, the infirmary, extra, anything that's not on board currently actually in slots, just extra stuff that we can have. But the nice thing about it is all this stuff over here, including our money, our extra crew, and our modules can also be traded with other players. And also, we can always switch things out because there is an action that allows us to do that. Rearrange how everything happens to be laid out on our board. The only final thing to understand is that you're going to notice that there's numbers on every one of these modules. If we ever suffer a hull breach, we're going to take damage on one of these different sections based on the roll of dice. We're going to roll 1 6-sided die. Whatever die face we roll is going to be the module that's going to be damaged. So for example, if I rolled a 3, that means that this module will be damaged, and that module itself will be listed as offline. We'd have to go and repair that. But I'll explain how that when we get to the combat. Just want to explain the ship boards themselves, so now you can understand everything else I want to explain to you how to play the game of Deep Space D-6 Armada. Now that you understand how the player ships work, I can actually explain to you how the rest of the game itself works. So the very first thing we need to do is the very first player needs to get the starting player badge icon. Now, generally speaking, you really don't need to use a starting player badge icon. If you want to, it is here for you. You do need to make sure you place a rubber band around it to keep it together because it is a double-sided. Because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to keep these cards inside it, and the players can pull these cards out to use them. Just like so. I personally don't use them, especially since this is a game that has a very fluid turn structure. You're more than welcome to use this. I personally don't use it, so I'm just going to place this off to the side. Additionally, there are also shield tokens that come with the game. Now, I also personally don't use these when I play the game. I'm going to teach you how to play with them, but when we get to the point where I explain how damage works, especially with the enemy shields, I'll show these to you, and then I'll explain to you exactly what I do so I don't have to use these. It kind of makes the game just a little more cleaner on the tabletop. At the start of the game, after every single player has their specific ships, and I'm starting off here with a 2-ship game just to show you exactly how it works. Next thing we need to do is we need to lay out all the plans for all the players. Now, the players are going to be visiting these planets, doing various different actions, interacting, doing away missions, attacking the fleets of the enemy of the evil Federation, and traveling around and interacting with these different planets in different ways. Now, all these planet boards are double-sided. You have the standard side, which actually shows which planet can lead to another planet. For example, from Terra, you can go to Zenith 1. From Zenith 1, you can go to Invictus. From Invictus, you can go to Titan, but you can't go from Titan to the Luna because you see that Titan only connects to Invictus, Terra, and Kagawa. So that's the only way you get from every single planet to every other planet. But when you play the game as a one ship only, not just a pure solo game, but when you play solo with only one ship, you use the backside of all the planets. And when you're playing that way, do know that since there's no points from every single one of these planets, that does mean that all planets are effectively one space away. Other than that, you need to move from a connected planet to another connected planet. Next up, you need to make sure you shuffle the threat detected deck, the enemy ship deck, and the hero deck, but do not shuffle the event deck. The event deck you're going to see is numbered all the way from 0 all the way up to 99, and these events are going to come up in a random order based on the draw of a bag. So you don't want to shuffle this up because you don't want to be hunting through this deck trying to find the events that happen to match up with these tokens right here. And speaking of these tokens, what you want to do is you want to take your Deep Space D-6 Armada bag and make sure you place all the distress tokens in this bag at the start of the game, with one quick caveat and also one difficulty affecting change on the game. The one thing you want to make sure you never do is you're never going to add the 00, you're never going to add the 99, and you're never going to add the 80 distress beacon into the bag. Additionally, when you first start the game, you need to decide on what difficulty level you want to play at. The standard difficulty level is you're going to add 2 of these Don't Panic tokens into the bag, but you can add more Don't Panic tokens if you want to make the game easier, or less Don't Panic tokens in the bag if you want to make the game harder. But this is basically where all our distress tokens are going to be coming from, and every time we're required to choose a new distress token, we're not going to shuffle the event deck, we're simply going to draw from the bag, and that's going to give us our event tokens that we're going to add onto the planets based on the locations those distress beacons are supposed to appear. Next up, we want to organize everything with an easy access to all the players. Obviously, we want our credits, we want our fleets, our dice, our cargo cards, our event cards, and basically put everything in nice, easy access for all the players, including the damage and everything else that the players may have to encounter. And then every single player is going to need to get their basic start and resources. Now in a 2-player game, which I'm showing you right here, a 2 and a 3-player game, every single player is going to start with 5 of the basic crew dice. These are the white dice right here, and they're going to start with 2 credits. If we happen to be playing a 1-player game, the ship we're going to choose, again, is going to use the solo shields and the solo hull that I already showed you earlier. But additionally, you're going to start with 6 crew and 2 credits only. And if you're playing a 4-player game, or I should say a 4-ship game, every single ship is going to start with 5 crew, but they're going to start with 0 credits. So basically, 1 ship is 6 crew, 2 credits. 2 and 3 ships is 5 crew, 2 credits. And finally, 4 ships is going to be 5 crew and 0 credits. Then what we're going to do is we're going to place the station modules in a box lid, and these are all going to be all the different modules that are available for our ships. There's another way you do this. You can also use a drawstring bag if you like, but there's no extra bags for the game, so basically tell you to put all the modules in this box, and when you're going to draw modules, you basically do a blind draw from the box. Make sure you're not peeking, don't cheat, look in, and then you're going to draw modules out of the box lid just like that. So let's place it off to the side with an easy access for all the players. Next up, we need to place the prime event 00 on Terra planet right there, and then we're going to put that card into play, signifying that event is in play. There's some thematic text on the front of it, and then there's the game effects and how we're going to complete that event on the front. Now, this card does have a misprint on it, even though it does not say so. Understand that the 00 Terra event is a prime event. Now, there's a difference between prime events and regular events. Basically, you cannot handle any regular events anywhere on any of the planets unless all the prime events and all the planets have been taken out of play. If there's at least 1 prime event in play, you cannot go after any secondary events. Basically, these are the most grandest distress beacons that have to be solved by our heroes as quickly as possible. The only thing left to do for setup is go ahead and seed our starting additional distress beacons. The amount of additional distress beacons we're going to draw is going to be based on the player count. Now, there are some hint cards that come with the game. There are arrows on these hint cards. It's not 1 threat detected, it's 2. So if you're looking at that, just understand there are some arrows in there. Again, check out that FAQ. It goes over some of the errors that happen to be in the printout for this game. But understand that at the start of the game, we're going to draw a certain amount of distress beacons based on the amount of ships in the game. If we're playing with 1 or 2 ships, we will simply draw 1 distress beacon, and it's going to be added to one of the planets. If we happen to be playing a 3 or 4 ship game, we are going to draw 2 distress beacons. Now, whenever we draw a distress beacon, they are going to have a card associated with it. So in this example, I drew out the 6-0 and the 6-7 distress beacon. So I'm simply going to hunt down the 6-0 card, and I'm going to hunt down the 6-7 distress beacon. And then that is going to tell me exactly where those distress beacons are going to appear. So if we look at the card right here, we see that 6-7 is going to go ahead and spawn on Kagawa. So I put 6-7 over here. And then I put this over here face up after I read the thematic text if we wanted to do so for people playing the game, and we'll place that in play right there. And then for the 6-0, we're going to see that one is going to spawn on Zenith 1. We'll place that right there. Read the thematic text, and then we will flip it over, and then we will know that is one of the events that's currently in play. That's basically the setup for the game. Let's go and explain how to play the game itself. The game of Space D-6 Armada is played out over rounds, and the rounds are broken down into 3 different phases. And the first and the second phase is very fluid when it comes to turn order. During the first and the second phase, turn order is going to go in whatever order we want, and we don't even need to follow the same turn order when it goes from phase to phase. So for example, if we're playing a 2-ship game, during phase 1, we can have Dawn's Reach go first, and then we could have Hades go second, and then in phase 2, we can switch that around and have Hades go first and have the Dawn's Reach go second. The only caveat to that, though, is that one player cannot interrupt another player's action. One player must finish all of their actions for the current phase that they're in, and then the next player can start activating. There's no interruption. So pick whoever's going to go. They do everything for that phase. Next player they want to go will do everything for that phase, and then we'll continue to go through that. Once everybody's done all their actions for the phase, we simply move on to the next phase, and we're going to do that for the first, the second, and the third phase, and we're going to keep doing that from round to round to round until our heroes win, or until the evil Armada, the evil Federation, destroys our heroes, and our heroes must try again at a later date. Basically, the players are going to play round after round until they figure out exactly what the final Federation enemy is going to be, and the game is going to end in victory when the players manage to discover the Federation's source of power and defeat it. And the standard game takes 2 data chips to reveal the final encounter. And again, that is in the FAQ, the DX version of the rules. In the rules from the rulebook, it tells you something completely different. So understand the most up-to-date version of rules tells you it's 2 data disks, and that's going to bring about the end game condition that we're going to figure out for our end game. The game is either going to end with victory for our heroes, or the game's going to end in defeat when all player starships are in the critical damage state, or there are 5 or more distress tokens on any single planet. At the beginning of every round, we're going to go ahead and start with phase number 1, and phase number 1 is going to be the planning phase. During the planning phase, players are going to complete in any player order, but again, like I said earlier, players must complete their entire phase actions before the next player can go. So each player is going to take 2 actions on their turn during the first phase, and the phase actions that we can take can be broken down as follows. Now you can do each one of these actions multiple times, but again, you can only take up to 2 actions, but you repeat the same action, and these actions are as follows. And I guess I should put in right here, since I completely forgot, and I do apologize, at the start of the game, before we do anything, once we've completely set everything up, all of our heroes do start on Terra Prime, and I apologize for that, but that is part of the setup. Make sure you put your ships out there on Terra Prime after we seed all the planets. But the actions we can do, the very first thing we do is we do the travel action. Now to do the travel action, you're simply going to pick up your ship and move to any one of the adjacent planets. Now it doesn't matter which planet you move to if we're playing the solo rules, because remember, like I said in the solo rules, all the planets are connected. But when we're playing a 2, 3, or 4 player game, all the players are connected in very specific ways, and you only move from a connected planet to a connected planet. So for example, we're playing from 2 to 4 ships. Kagawa can never go directly to Invictus unless we take the travel action twice, because we see that Kagawa is only connected to Titan, connected to Terra, and connected to Zenith 1. Additionally, you'll see that Luna is only connected to one thing, and that happens to be the planet of Terra itself. The next action a player can do is they can do the repair action. Now, do a repair action, they're going to roll all the dice that they have available to them. Now, like I said earlier, you can have more dice than the limit as part of your ship, but they can't be part of your crew. At any time, the maximum amount of dice you can ever use for any kind of action in the game is going to be based on the player count. Now, in a 1-player game, the maximum amount of dice you can ever have assigned to any kind of action is 8. In a 2-player game, the maximum amount of dice is 7. In a 3-player game, the max amount is 7 also. And in a 4-player game, the max amount you can ever have assigned to any action is 6. So while I could, through various different actions, hire lots of different crew, add all these crew onto my ship, and have all these different heroes as part of my crew, it doesn't matter, because every single action based on the player count in the game, that's the maximum amount of dice I can assign to anything. And what I'm basically going to do is pick the dice that I want to roll. They're probably going to give me the best results that I want, and then the rest of the dice are going to be off to the side, ready for any future actions, and I can mix and match them at any time whenever I take the reset action. But I'll explain how all that works in just a moment. Just understand that there is a maximum amount of dice you can ever have assigned for any specific actions at all. So to explain to you how to do the repair action, I'm actually going to cheat really quick, and I'm going to take one hero just to show you basically how the repair action works. But for the repair action, and this is one of your 2 actions, again, you can do this twice, You're simply going to roll all your dice up to your maximum, and you're looking for a certain result to come up on the dice face. If you happen to get any gear symbols, or if you happen to get any of the command tokens, this is basically a wild card right here. It can be used to take the place of any other one of the symbols in the game, but it cannot be replaced by any other symbols. I'll explain to you what I mean in just a couple moments here, but for every gear or every one of these wildcard symbols you roll, you're going to repair your hull 1 point. So for example, our hull happened to be at 2 right here, and I rolled this with my repair action. I would go from a 2 hull all the way up to a 4 hull. And if I have another action available, because I've used both my actions, I can go ahead and do the repair action all over again, roll the dice, and see that in this case I would not do any repairs at all, which would be a not so great roll for me, especially if I need my hull to be fixed to go ahead and attack the enemy fleets. The next action you do is going to be a trade action. Now, do a trade action, you need to be on the same planet as the ship you want to trade with. Now, the nice thing about doing a trade action is you can give or trade modules, heroes, or credits with any other ship that happens to be on the same planet with you. Now, you're going to pick a ship to trade with. So, for example, if we happen to have multiple ships at the same planet, I can't trade with all of them. I need to pick the one player I'm deciding that I want to do the trade with. And again, you move modules back and forth. You can go ahead and move hero, crew back and forth, and you can always go ahead and move money back and forth. The next action available to our players during phase number 1 is going to be the buy and configure action. Now, the buy and configure action can only be performed at certain locations. You're going to notice all these planets have certain different things. Some of them have a way station, and some of them happen to have a shipyard. If you happen to be at any planet that has a shipyard, you can do the buy and configure action. Again, you can only do this at the shipyard. And the way this is going to work is you're simply going to take the box lid, like we said earlier, or a drawstring bag if that's what you like. You're going to reach in here without peeking at what you're picking, and you're going to draw out 3 of these modules right here. Now, all these modules happen to have a various different things on them, such as cost and various different abilities. But the most important thing we're going to notice is that these are going to have a cost on them. Now, for example, this one costs 5 to purchase, this one costs 4 to purchase, and this one right here also costs 5 to purchase. Additionally, you're going to notice that some of these cards, these upgrade tokens, are going to say an upgrade cost on them. And basically that means is if you have a prior version of this weapon, for example, if you have the Lotus Mark 1 laser, you can upgrade it from the 1 to the 2 if you happen to draw this token by just spending 2 credits total. And we're basically going to discard those credits to the discard pile. But the cool thing about this is when you draw these 3 random tiles from the box lid or the drawstring bag, whatever you like to do, you can buy 0, 1, 2, or up to 3 of these tokens and add them onto your ship. And the cost is going to be listed right here. Then every single one of them is going to give you different benefits or different abilities, and you will have to slot them onto your ship. Now, if you don't slot them on your ship, they are not going to give you any benefits, and they're simply going to sit in your crew and in your cargo hold. And again, you don't have to slot these if you don't want, and there's some reasons why you may, and some reasons why you may not want to. For example, as I said earlier, you can always exchange these with other ships. So for example, if you have one ship who has a module that's not helping them as much, or it could help another ship much more, you could always trade that module to the other ship itself, or you can just keep it over here, or you can shuffle it back onto your ship itself once you purchase that module. After you do or do not make a purchase, again, you can purchase anywhere from 0 to up to 3 of these modules. You have the option to rearrange how the modules sit on your current ship. And that doesn't mean you can take modules in and out. You can move modules around, and why would you do that? Well, perhaps maybe you covered a different module earlier, and now you want that module uncovered for any special reasons. But you can do a reconfigure action, which allows you to move these modules in and out, and again, that can also allow you to start trading with the other players if you can start doing a trade action on a later date. Any modules that you don't purchase during this buy action are going to simply be returned to the box. But the most important thing about these modules is they're going to give you extra ways to spend your dice, because you're going to notice that these modules have different symbols on them. For example, this one right here has this symbol right here. So if you happen to roll that symbol, you can assign that die. Again, this one has a box, so we can only assign 1 die to it, but we can assign that die to go ahead and do what this does. And this says do 5 energy damage. So again, we can't do that multiple times because there is that box there, but we can definitely assign one of these dice symbols to here to do 5 damage during a combat step. The next action and the final action available to us during phase number 1 is going to be the hire crew action. So when we do the hire crew action, you're simply going to draw 3 heroes from the top of the hero deck. And the heroes are going to have a cost associated with going ahead and purchasing them. They'll have a die specifically assigned to them, and basically you need to go through all the dice and try to find the die that has the correct matching faces. It does take you a couple moments because their dice aren't really marked in any special way. Basically go through and make sure that all the dice faces happen to match all the symbols down here. player, and then you can purchase any and all of these heroes. Now again, all these heroes do have a cost, and if you have enough money, you can buy all 3 of those heroes, or you can just buy 0 of those heroes if you really want. But they're going to be part of your crew from then on, and they're going to be available to do away missions and also available to do fleet combat missions also. Now, the important thing to understand about when you're hiring the crew is you need to make sure that you're respecting the player count max amount of crew that you can ever have assigned to any missions that come with the game. So when you're playing a 1-player game, like I said earlier, the max amount of crew you can ever have is 8, 2 or 3-player game is 7, and a 3-player game is going to be, a 4-player game is going to be 6 crew assigned to it. Extra crew must be kept on the side of the shipboard, right over here, and they cannot be assigned until you do the action to go ahead and switch them back into your crew itself. The nice thing about these guys, though, is that you can use these heroes to go ahead and replace your basic crew. So you could potentially have a really good crew where you get rid of all your basic red shirts and start replacing with the heroes who do a lot more powerful things. Any heroes that are not purchased, and again, you're not forced to purchase any of the heroes you draw, especially if you don't like any of the heroes you draw, but any heroes not purchased will need to be shuffled back into the hero deck. Now, I personally, when I play the game, I just, whatever heroes were not selected, I'm going to stick on the bottom of the deck because I don't want to excessively shuffle the cards all the time. But the rules do say that the heroes not purchased are going to be shuffled back into the hero deck itself, which means there's a good chance those heroes may come back extra early. That's basically everything that can occur in Phase 1. Once all the players have made all their choices for Phase 1, remember each player can do 2 actions, and we repeat the same actions once that's done for all of our players. And again, doing nothing is an option. If you don't want to do anything, then we're going to go on to phase number 2. Phase 2 is the encounter phase. During the encounter phase, players are going to encounter any fleets they may have in the same spots as them, and they're also going to encounter events that may also be in the same locations they happen to be. The big thing to understand about Phase 2, just like Phase 1, is that players can complete in any order that they want, but they must complete their entire turn before the next player in player order can go. Basically, what's going to happen is the players are going to see if they have any fleets in their location or if they happen to have any distress beacons in their location. If a player has at least 1 fleet in their current location, they must encounter that 1 fleet. And additionally, they can keep encountering multiple different fleets until they either suffer a defeat, until they decide to stop, or until they are forced to flee from a combat with a fleet. If a player happens to be in any location that does not happen to have any fleets, or if they manage to defeat all the fleets in their current location, and then and only then they may encounter 1 and only 1 distress beacon. That's the important thing to understand. You can fight as many fleets as you want until you stop, but you're only allowed to encounter 1 distress beacon ever. And on top of that, if there's any prime distress beacons in play, then you must encounter a prime distress beacon. It doesn't matter what planet those distress beacons happen to be on, there's at least 1 prime beacon in play that must be completed before any other beacons can be completed. Now, there's multiple prime beacons in play, then any of those prime beacons can be completed in any order. But again, all the prime beacons must be defeated before we get to any secondary distress beacons. Encounter fleets in the game lead to combat, and encountered distress beacons will lead to away missions in the game. And basically the way this is going to occur is we are going to use our dice like our crew, and we're going to use this crew to try to go ahead and roll certain dice faces that's going to allow us to handle the requirements for each one of the things. For example, certain enemy ships are going to require us to defeat their shields and their hull to take them out. Away missions are going to require us to make certain rolls to go ahead and complete these away missions to get results, or possibly suffer defeat where bad things are going to happen. So players are trying to encounter these fleets, encounter these away missions in effort to go ahead and unlock them until we eventually manage to unlock the 2 data chips and again bring about the end game condition. Basically how this works is that rolled faces are going to be used to handle the requirements. And again, we're going to roll the dice and we're going to be looking for certain results to get. The cool thing is that wild cards are basically can be used for any different symbol out there on the board when we're trying to do missions. So for example, if I was trying to complete this mission, if I rolled these dice right here, and these were all the sides that came up, I could assign this 1 die right here, since it has 2 command tokens, to complete both of these requirements and go ahead and satisfy what that requires. And then I could also use the rest of my dice to possibly complete other things. But there's extra rules that are required. I'll explain exactly how that works when we get to command missions. Just understand that your dice can be required to complete these away missions and all these requirements. If we ever see a blank symbol, that means that any one of the dice faces can be used to meet that requirement. But if it has a specific facing on that card, then we must roll that specific symbol on one of our dice to go ahead and complete that requirement. Again, wild cards can be used for any symbol, but if it specifically says that a wild card must be placed there, that means that we must actually roll that wild card and place it on that. The only thing that can be used for anything is a blank symbol. A blank space can be replaced by any one of the dice faces themselves, including the blank dice face. There's a couple rules we need to understand about when we're assigning dice to our crew. We're going to basically place them to meet the requirements. We must do all of our rerolls before we start assigning any dice to a space. Assigned dice cannot be moved once assigned until they are reset back to our dice pool. The requirements surrounded by a box, such as what we have right here, must not have more dice assigned to them than the total amount of symbols in that box. Now, it's not going to be too important for away missions, but it's going to be very, very important for weapons. As I showed you right here, this doesn't mean that we can assign multiples of this symbol right here to totally make a combat completely easy. We can't assign all three of these to do a super lot of damage with our big Lagrange Saber Ultra Cannon. No, it can only have one die assigned to it because it does have the symbol around it. So don't make that mistake. It's very, very important, especially when we're talking about our modules here. Requirements without a box can have as many dice as they want assigned to them though. So for you see right here, there is no box around the symbol, so that does mean I could assign 3 dice right here to do 3 points of energy damage. Of course, dice will be assigned individually one at a time. I'll explain exactly how it works when we get to the combat. The next final thing to understand though is that if you ever see a requirement that happens to have an arrow facing down like this card does right here, that means that we need to do the entire row before we move on to the next row right after it. So that means that even if I had this card in play right here, and let's say I rolled this wonderful roll right here that shows I got the wild card symbol, I can't complete this wild card symbol right here yet until I complete this whole entire row. And not only that, but once you complete one box, you have to stop rolling. You'll see how all that works when we get to the away missions here very, very shortly. So since combat happens before away missions, let's go ahead and describe exactly how combat works. So for the combat, the first thing to understand is when it comes to the game, there are 3 different kinds of weapon systems. The first weapon system is going to be energy, which does damage directly to shields. And once all the shields have been completely obliterated, that is going to start doing damage to our hull. The next kind of damage is going to be kinetic damage, which does damage directly to a hull. Doesn't matter how much shield you have, any kinetic damage is going to be applied directly to your hull. And then there's going to be ion damage, which can only be applied to shields themselves, which means that if your shields have been completely depleted, any additional ion damage will not do any damage to your ship at all, and it won't do any damage to your enemy ships either. Basically, the way this is if there's ion damage and there's no shields left, it's pretty much worthless to you because it does not do hull damage at all. If a player's hull is ever reduced to 0, that means that their ship is now entered the critical status. And when a ship enters the critical status, again, we're simply going to flip the ship token over to signify that that ship is now entered the critical status. Other than that, it's going to be in our normal status on the current planet, whatever planet we happen to be currently interacting with at this time. The good news though is that any shields that you reduce during a combat, they are always going to recharge completely back to full at the end of any single combat. So if our shields haven't been completely wiped out, if we survive the combat, and if we have at least one hull left over, our shields are going to be completely repaired after the combat. And if any ship are in the critical status and we manage to get all the ships in critical status, remember, our players are going to instantly lose the game. So the first thing we're going to do when a combat does occur is we're going to reveal all the ships that have to be currently involved in the fleet that we're attacking. I'll explain how fleets occur and then how exactly that's going to happen when we get to phase 3. Don't want to jump ahead of myself, but basically we're going to reveal all the ships that have to be part of that specific fleet. And we're simply going to lay all these ships out directly right here, right in front of the player who's attacking all those ships right here. So we see in this case, the Pathfinder is now fighting a fleet of a Gallant, a Sentinel, another Sentinel, and a Shrike. Every one of these ships is going to be breaking down in how much hull it has and also how much shields it has. Now remember how I told you earlier that I don't use the shield tokens? We'll pull them out just so you see exactly how they work. But again, I generally don't use them. I have a much, much easier way that I handle things. I'm just going to show them for these 3 ships right here really quickly, and I'll explain to you what I do. I don't use them at all. My way, I think, works a heck of a lot better, at least for me and for my gaming group. Now, when we do lay out the ships, it is important that we keep the order of the ships in a specific order, because sometimes order may matter. And when it does come to order, all the ships are going to activate from left to right. So that doesn't mean if order matters, the Gallant's going to attack before the Sentinel will attack before the Sentinel, and again, the Sentinel will attack before the Shrike. Most of the time, it doesn't matter, but sometimes it can matter, especially when we start talking about ion and energy, so make sure you're paying attention to having the ships attack from left to right, especially since we see this one can do kinetic and hull breaches. This one does energy only, this one does energy only, and this ship we see over here does energy damage only. Now that we have our battle set up and our heroes know exactly which ships we're going to be encountering in this wonderful fight, we're going to reveal all of our heroes that we're going to involve in this fight. Now in this example, this is a basic starting ship that doesn't have any extra heroes. I'm going to go ahead and grab one hero just so you can see exactly how heroes can make a difference during a fight, and just see how extra heroes can kind of be very, very beneficial to our heroes, especially when we start attacking these very large fleets right here. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll all of our hero dice. And then before we start assigning all these dice, if we have any reroll actions for any reason, we must do all of our rerolls before we assign any dice. So let's say for some reason I have the ability to reroll 3 dice. Let's go ahead and reroll those 3 dice, and we will get the new results right here and see that, well, we're not doing too great here, and you'll see exactly why in just a second. But after we go ahead and roll all of our dice, we are going to assign all of our dice to our modules, and our modules are going to allow us to do things. In this example, the only thing we can see is we can assign tactical modules for damage. We can assign this die right here to go ahead and repair our shields, but our shields are at full, so nothing we can do there. And this right here can be used to take dice out of the infirmary. So we see that this is not the greatest roll in the world right here. Probably a really bad start for us. I think we're about to start taking some damage. So just for the purpose of this tutorial, let's go ahead and cheat and change some of these dice faces so you can actually see exactly how combat works, because I'm sure you want to see how combat works, not how to fail miserably at combat really quickly. The important thing to understand though is before we go any further is if you ever reach a point where you have no dice to roll, you are defeated and you've lost the combat, and you can go into the end of the combat phase. I'll explain how that all works in just a second. But basically after you've rolled your dice and performed any re-rolls you want to do, then and only then you're going to start assigning your dice one at a time. And as you assign your dice, you will perform the action on that die. For example, if I assign this die right here, I'm going to do 1 energy damage. So I need to pick one of the enemy ships right here, and I'm going to do 1 energy damage to it. So in this case, I've done 1 energy damage to the shield of the ship. Now to show you what I do, because I don't use these little energy tokens, when I do damage to a shield, I simply place one of these damage cubes down on the bottom right here. That signifies that is going to be shield damage. And if I'm doing hull damage, I place the little cubes along the top. For me, it's easy to remember shield damage and hull damage instead of using these little fiddly little tokens right here. So for the rest of this tutorial, I am not using these shield tokens because I don't like them at all. Now continuing on with our combat example, we're going to see that we have different locations, like I said, to assign the dice, and we're going to resolve them as we assign them. Do note there is an infirmary section down here, and basically when we assign dice to the infirmary, it's its own special module location, and what we do is we're going to place a rolled medic symbol here to retrieve all the wounded dice from our infirmary. That allows us to get our dice back from the infirmary and allows us to roll them on the next turn of this combat. Do note that when you pull your units back out of the infirmary, they don't activate on that round that are pulled out of the infirmary, so we can't roll them. We're past the rolling phase. We're now going into the assignment phase for our dice at this point. We're going to keep assigning dice to our modules as long as we want to, or until we've assigned all of our dice. And unless otherwise listed, the same modules can always be activated multiple times as long as you have the correct dice faces. So I could then assign this die right here to go ahead and do another point of damage. Let's say I've already done 1 point to the shields now. I can decide to do another point of damage with my second die right here, do 1 point of damage to the whole of this ship right here. The important thing to understand though is, let's say I had got a 3rd die of damage right here, and I would do another point of damage right here. At this point, this ship would have 2 points of hull damage, and even though its shields are also obliterated, the ship is actually not destroyed. Enemy ships are not going to be defeated until phase 3 of the combat round, even though we've assigned enough damage to destroy this, unless we've used a special weapon that allows us to do instant damage. Explain how that works in just a couple moments. But as long as we didn't do instant damage, the ship is still going to get to retaliate against us during the second combat phase. And let's go ahead and explain how the second combat phase works right now. So during the second enemy combat phase, after we decide to stop assigning dice, or we don't have any more dice left to assign, at this point now we're going to roll 1 die, the black die, 1 time for all the enemy ships. And every one of the enemy ships is going to follow the logic of whatever I happen to roll here, and we're going to resolve again from left to right. So we're going to look at the ship. Do we have any 6 here? We do not, so we're going to skip this ship. We're going to come over here and see that this one has a 6, so we're going to follow the instructions for the 6, which says we're going to take 1 energy damage. Energy damage attacks shields first, so our shields are going to go down from 4 down to 3. We'll go over to the ship right here. It says a 6 is going to be 1 energy damage, so we're going to go from 3 down to 2. Then a 6 right here is going to do 2 energy damage. So we go from 2 down to 0, which means any more damage we take is going to go directly to our hull. Things are not looking good for our ships right now. But now we get to move over to combat phase 3 now that all the enemy ships have attacked. So at this point, any fleet ships with hull damage equal to their hull, as we see with this Gallant right now, are going to be destroyed. Once the ship is destroyed, simply go ahead and remove all the damage cubes from it and then go ahead and place it off to the side. Now, I like to turn them sideways just like this because they're going to give us some salvage at the end of the combat as long as we survive this battle and manage to defeat all these ships. So I just place them on the side, and as I defeat them, I slowly just start stacking them like this. Again, that's what I like to do. You don't have to do it. Just for me, it's a lot easier just to do that. But once we finish the combat phase 3 right now we're going to move over to combat phase 4. For combat phase 4, the players are going to gather all of the dice that they have out here that are either not locked, and again, some dice will lock by special powers and special modules will lock them, and any dice that are not in the infirmary. So basically, if we have any dice in the infirmary, they're not available to us, and if they happen to be locked, they're also not available to us. But we're simply going to gather up all of the dice that we have right now, and then we can either decide that we're going to try to escape from combat, or we can decide to go back to the first combat phase and go ahead and start attacking these enemy ships again. And we're going to keep going through that cycle until either we're defeated or all the enemy ships have been defeated, or we go ahead and manage to escape successfully from combat. Now, to escape from combat, we're going to use the escape tactic card, and the way the escape tactic card works is we're looking for one of 2 results. And to do this, we are simply going to roll our dice, and we're hoping to get one of these 2 results. So I could, for example, place this right here, and that would complete 1 box. And remember, we're basically done. We can do the other box on a later turn. Or I can take any symbol at all right here, which is going to force me to set my hull all the way down to 1, not to 0, down to 1. So that's basically what's going to happen. Then we're going to escape from combat right here. It says move your ship to any nearby location, resolve combat as a defeat. So we're basically going to keep doing this over and over and over through phase 1 through 4 of the combat round until we either, like I said, defeat all the ships. And once all the ships are defeated, we will be good as long as we have at least 1 point of hull left. Or if our hull is completely obliterated, or we happen to escape, those are the only 3 ways that combat's going to come to an end. If we manage to win the combat, we're going to gain scrap, which is also the currency of the game, which happens to be the credits. And the way this is going to work is we're going to gain the credit value of the most valuable ship of each specific faction. So if we have multiple ships of the same faction, we're going to pick the ship that gives us the most credits, and that's the ship that's going to give us all the credits. And we're going to do that for every different faction that's involved in every single one of these combats. So for example, we see in this combat, we had 3 Federation ships and 1 Xena ship at all. So that means we're going to look at the most highest value Federation ship, and all of these happen to give 1 apiece. So we're simply going to gain 1 credit for all 3 of these Federation ships. Yes, it's unfortunate. If you ever have a fight with 5 Federation ships and all of them happen to be 1, yes, you can potentially get 1 credit only. And then we're going to do this for all the different kind of factions involved in this fight. So in this example, even though we just defeated 4 ships, the only thing we're going to gain is 3 credits. 2 from the Xena and 1 from whichever one of these ships we want. That is going to be our total credits we're going to gain in salvage for winning this combat. Next up, we're going to recharge all of our shields all the way back up to max value. Now remember, our hull does not repair at the end of any combat. We only recharge our shields. We're going to retrieve any dice that happen to be in the infirmary, and they're going to go back onto our ship available for us for any future combats, especially if we want to keep on fighting. And at this point, we may decide that we may attack another fleet, or there's no additional fleets that happen to be present in our current area. Then and only then we can go ahead and attempt to do one of these distress beacons. Now, if we happen to be defeated in combat, we're basically going to have this happen. If our hull during the combat goes all the way down to 0, we know that combat is immediately going to end and our ship is going to go into the critical status. We're going to flip our pawn over to signify that it is now in the critical status, and then we have to move our ship over to a nearby planet. So for example, if we had performed this combat over here on Terra, we'd have to pick one of the nearby planets and move over to it. And since Terra's connected all of them, yeah, I could technically move over to Terra if I wanted to. That is one of my options if I wanted to do so. But let's say instead I decided to move over here to Zenith 1 instead. The nice thing is that when our ship is in critical status, we cannot have any more fleet encounters and we cannot have any more away missions. We're basically done until we completely repair our ship by doing the repair action during the first phase. If any of the ships during the fleet that we were fighting happened to survive, they would be returned back to the fleet, and any ships that were destroyed are going to be removed over to the enemy ship discard pile. But any ships that manage to survive the fight are going to completely recharge their hull, and they're going to completely recharge their shields, and then be placed back up on the board as an available fleet for anybody else to fight, and that's going to be a fleet that's going to stay in play. Even though I managed to take out some of the ships in it, it's still going to be in play and ready to fight more and more. The only thing left to do is if we happen to have any dice in our infirmary, we're going to take those dice out of the infirmary. Our encounter phase is going to end, and that's going to be the end of the phase for that player. That player is done with their phase 2. The next player in line can go ahead and take their phase 2 actions that they want. Also do note though that if you suffer defeat, you are not going to gain any scrap value at all. So if you flee from combat, or if you're defeated, or if your hull is completely defeated, you're not going to get any scrap at all. Even if you manage to fight a large fleet of 7 ships, you destroy 6 of those 7 ships, but the 7th ship managed to defeat you, you get 0 scrap at all. You still suffer full defeat. So there's a couple of different things to understand about combat, a couple of different special abilities. Now some of our hero ships will get some of these special abilities, and some of the fleets we encounter will get some of these special abilities. But the special abilities on order are quick strike, which basically means if it kills a target, the target does not strike back during phase 2. So if we have a quick strike module and we manage to take out this ship during phase 1 of the combat, it does not get to retaliate to us, so we can basically remove it from the combat immediately. Next thing we have is multi-target, which means we can split the damage from one weapon across multiple different targets per turn. For example, if we had a multi-target that did 2 damage, we can do 1 damage to each one of these ships if we wanted to by picking 2 different targets. Next thing we can have is we have direct damage, which allows us to ignore any ships that happen to have protect. Some of the enemy fleets will have special power protect. If any ships in the enemy fleet have the protect power, we must defeat all the ships with the protect power before we attack any other ships, because protect protects all the non-ships that do not have the protect power on them at all. Next thing we have is we have area attacks, which hits all targets in the fleet unless there's a protect ship. We have an area effect attack, and there's multiple protect and multiple non-protect ships. The area attack only hits the ships with protect, the ones that are otherwise protected by the protect ships. Sorry, it's a lot of words for protect, but I think you do get the idea I'm trying to get across here. And then finally, the last thing to understand is going to be hull breaches. Now, hull breaches are very nasty, and we're going to know a hull breach by this symbol right here. So for example, in combat, if we roll the combat die and it happened to roll a result for us to suffer a hull breach, when that happens, we are going to again roll this die to see which one of our modules is going to be damaged. And the module we roll is the one that's going to be damaged, and it is going to be placed offline. Now, if there happens to be any modules in that location, that module will also be placed offline. The only caveat to that, though, is if it happens to be increased hull or increased shields, if we're lucky enough to get those modules still effectively operate, but they're just reduced capacity. The other thing to understand is that if we happen to have any units that are assigned to a module when it's taken offline, those crew members will go into the infirmary, which means they have to be healed. And the only way we get rid of this offline is by rolling the gear symbol, which allows us to get rid of the offline status on a future turn. So you gotta watch out for those hull breaches. They are very, very nasty, and they can start piling up, and you can start suffering multiple hull breaches and start losing multiple modules as part of your ship. The good news though is all your offline modules will be removed at the end of combat if you manage to survive the combat. So you could have 5 of these offline modules on your ship. If you manage to survive the combat, all those offline modules were removed at the end of the combat. And remember, don't forget your shields also recharge at full at the end of combat. So if you manage to limp across a battle with 1 hull left over, a whole bunch of offline modules, and a whole bunch of your crew in the infirmary, as long as you survive the battle, hey, any battle you walk away from is a good battle, even in space. Next up, we have away missions. Now remember, whenever we're doing away missions over here on the board, we have to make sure that we are completing prime missions first. And the way we tell a prime mission is by looking for any that have this little star down here, or we can always look at the card, and the card itself will say prime event. If it says prime event, we know it's a prime away mission. Of course, not to rehash the same thing I've said multiple times already. Remember, the 00 is a prime event, even though it isn't listed on the back, because if you look right here on the front, it does say prime away mission, letting you know that it is a little bit of misprint on the card itself. So to do a prime away mission, like I said before, there cannot be any enemy fleets in the planet we are doing this away mission on. So in this example, this player cannot do this away mission right here, but this player can because there happens to be no fleets on this planet right here. Of course, prime missions must be done first, so even if the roles were reversed and it looked something like this ship cannot do this event. Well, I guess it could. This is a bad example because this is a prime event, but let's just use a better example here. Let's say there happened to be this event in play right here, and this player happened to be right here. non-critical, of course. Since this is a prime event, and since this is a prime event, that means that this player cannot complete this away mission until both of these away missions have been removed from the board. So since the turn structure is fluid, like I said before, they might as well just have this player and this player activate before this player gets to activate, because, you know, smarter way to play. So once we've done that, now let's go and explain exactly how the away missions work themselves. The away missions are basically going to require us to go ahead and complete some requirements that are going to be listed on every one of these away missions. Now, every one of these away missions are going to have a number on it. They're going to have a basic rough text of exactly what's going on. We're going to have some requirements we need to complete. If we manage to succeed, we're going to gain something. If we manage to fail, something bad is going to happen to us. Now, failures can be anything such as direct damage to our hull. Now, this isn't shield damage, this is actually direct damage to our hull. Or we may get data chips. And the nice thing about the data chips is it may be a specific data chip that we'll have to grab. We'll have to find the data chip that actually matches that specific symbol right there. Or sometimes it'll tell us to grab a random data chip, which means we're going to take all the face down data chips like that, simply flip one of them over, and that's going to be the data chip we're going to gain. But some of these away missions are going to require us to perform certain things. And if we ever see this arrow right here, it shows these down arrows pointing down like that. That means that this away mission has to be completed in order, which means I cannot complete any of these two bottom requirements until I manage to get this requirement completed. So if I continue to roll terribly, I may continue to fail at this top one right here, because again, until we manage to complete it, we can't move down at all. Now, every single away mission is going to start with away mission phase number 1. Now, for phase number 1, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to simply roll all the available crew dice we happen to have for our ship. We're going to simply roll all the crew dice, and then we can, if we have any optional rerolls available to us by powers or anything we happen to have, we can go ahead and do any rerolls that we may want to do. Once we've done the rerolls, then we're going to start assigning the dice to this away mission right here. And we're going to assign these dice to the away missions in every single one of these sections. Now, we're going to keep assigning the dice as long as we have matching crew symbols that match up that are able to do it, as long as we want to keep assigning crew. And there may be some reasons why we may not want to do that. And again, we can keep doing this as long as we have not completed a specific box. Now, this card right here is a little bit tougher one to examine or use for examples. So I'm going to use this one also for examples, because we got the down arrow forcing us to complete this in this top to bottom order right here. Again, this one has to be completed top to bottom. This one right here, since there's no arrow, we can complete any one of these options, any order we want to go ahead and complete that away mission. And the reason why it's so important to explain this is because when we're assigning dice, if we manage to fill in a box, we have to stop assigning dice, complete part 1 of the away mission phase, move on to the second part of the away mission phase, because once we've filled in a box, we're basically done. So what does that mean right here? Let's just say that this happens to be the away mission we are doing right now. I could, if I wanted to, assign this die right here, complete that part of the away mission, and we're done. I cannot assign any more of my dice, because once we fill in a box, again, like I said, we're done. What would be smarter to do, though, would be to assign this die right here, just like that. Again, I can keep assigning dice because I haven't filled in a complete box. But if I assigned it right there, again, I'm done. I've completely filled in a box. So I could assign that one right there, and then I could take this symbol right here, place it right here, and now I'm done because I've completely filled in a box. I cannot assign any more of my crew. Even if I happen to have other symbols, let's say, for example, I had another gear symbol like this, I couldn't assign it like that, because again, once the box is full, not to keep reiterating, but I think this is a problem that a lot of people are having with this game. Once you fill in the box, we're done. No more. We're done with phase number 1. After phase 1 of the away mission is done, we're going to move on to phase 2, which we're basically going to see if we have any success. And success means that we managed to completely fill in the card itself. And we managed to fill in completely the card, we are going to succeed in the away mission, and we are going to gain the success reward. This example, we would gain 3 credits. If we got this one a success, we get that data chip like I explained earlier. If we failed on this one, we take 2 hull damage. If we failed on this one, we're going to draw a random threat card, and I'll show you exactly how those work when we get to phase number 3. Of course, though, if we have not completed the away mission in phase number 2, we're going to move to away mission phase number 3, where we get to try again. If any requirements are not met, we may attempt again as long as we have dice left over to roll. If any of the filled mission sections box or rolled at least one medic symbol that was not assigned to any of the dice, we may go ahead and collect all of the dice that we have not assigned yet, and we can go ahead and re-roll them. But if we didn't get any medic symbols at all, we need to pick at least one of our dice, place a die in the infirmary, and unlike in combat, we cannot get dice out of the infirmary by rolling that medical symbol at all. Medic symbols just allow us to re-roll all of our dice If we don't get any medic symbols, we must discard one of our dice and then roll the remaining dice left over, because now we're going to move back into phase number 1. So again, like I said, we're looking for a medic symbol. If I had a medic symbol, I can re-roll all of these dice again back in phase number 1. No medic symbol, I must remove one of my dice, place it in the infirmary, and the dice is no longer available to me for this away mission. Afterwards, I move back to phase 1 of the away mission phase. I'm just going to roll my remaining dice. I'm hoping for lucky symbols. In this example, it looks like I didn't get any of the right. Well, actually, I got this universal symbol, so I could take this universal symbol, place it right here, and since I managed to complete at least one box, even if I didn't have the medical symbol, I could still keep rolling my remaining dice. Remember, you have to have at least one medical symbol, or complete at least one box, or you're going to have to get rid of one die at least to roll the remaining dice. But since I managed to get one success, let's go ahead and roll again. And hey, look, I got the gear. I would have completed this away mission right here. And if you complete away mission successfully, you get to gain any credits or whatever happens to show right here. Then you're going to return all of your crew back to your starship. You're going to discard the completed mission back into the box, and you're going to end your turn, and the next player in player order gets to take their turn. But if you fail to complete the mission because you run out of dice, then you are going to take a threat or hull damage. Again, this is damage directly to your hull, not your shields, but is damage directly to your hull. This may also put your ship into a critical state, so make sure you're very, very careful. Either way, you're still going to return all of your crew back to your ship, even the ones who happen to be in the infirmary, and then you are also going to end your turn. That's basically the complete encounter phase. Now the only thing left to do is explain phase 3 for the game, and phase 3 is going to be the resolution phase, where all the extra preparation, all the bad stuff pretty much is going to happen for our heroes. The first thing we're going to do for the resolution phase is we're going to draw distress beacons from the token bag, and the amount of distress beacons we're going to draw is going to be based, again, like on the player count. 1 to 2 ships, we're going to draw 1 distress beacon. If it happens to be 3 or 4 ships that happen to play, we're going to draw 2 distress beacons. Locations for the distress beacons will be based on the cards, and they're going to show us exactly where we're going to place the distress beacons. For example, 62 is going to be placed on Terra. That's going to be another prime distress beacon. Number 15 in this example is going to be placed on Luna, so we'll simply place that over here on Luna. Again, we have the thematic text. We can read the thematic text, flip the cards over, and then they're going to tell us what kind of requirements are required to go ahead and complete those missions that we may need to do. Next thing we are going to draw is threat detected cards. Now, the amount of threat detected cards we're going to draw is always 2. Ignore these player cards. They are incorrect. Doesn't matter. Player count 1, 2, 3, or 4. We always draw 2 threat detected cards. And way these are going to be resolved is we will draw a threat detected card, and it's going to tell us where a new fleet or additional growth on certain fleets happens to be. For example, this one's going to say we're going to create a new fleet involving 2 enemy ships on Terra. So we're simply going to grab one of these new fleet tokens. One we're going to use for the fleet itself. The other one we're going to put on the target planet. So we're going to see, oops, that is a 7, not a 1. Let's grab an actual 1. We'll place the 1 here on Terra, signifying where this fleet is going to be, and then we are going to draw 2 enemy ships. We are not going to reveal these enemy ships. We do not know what these enemy ships happen to be. We'll simply place them down here somewhere on the board. I usually like to place a nice spot, nice and central for all the players to see. And then we'll place the fleet matching fleet token right here, which signifies that fleet number 1, which is going to be on Terra, is also going to be affiliated with that fleet. So the moment we decide to attack that fleet, we're going to flip it over, reveal that fleet, and see what exactly is matching that one right there. So there's 2 different kind of fleets that we can get. We can get a new fleet, and we can also get a reinforcement one. Reinforcements can be extremely nasty because they can add more ships to all the fleets on a certain planet, and we are simply going to have to deal with what they'll say. It'll basically say reinforcements, and it's going to say add 2 enemy ships to all fleets on Luna. So if this fleet right here, fleet number 7, already had 3 ships in it, we would add 2 more ships. Again, those can be added face down. And we may have circumstances where a fleet won a battle against our heroes. Any fleet that survives a fight with our heroes is going to return face up, so they will be face up. So this happened to be the fleet that happened to be associated with Luna. This happened to be the number 7 fleet, and I drew this. I would draw 2 more ships, which would be placed face down as an unknown part of that fleet. But if I didn't have any fleets over here on Luna, I'd follow the next part of this card, which says create a new fleet of 2 enemy ships at Luna. So I would then have these 2 cards right here being another fleet, and that would be the fleet that would happen to be over here on the planet of Luna. After that, we will discard the threats detected cards, and that is all we need to do for that part. And we have populated the board with a new enemy fleets. Finally, the next thing we need to do is we need to look to see if there's any active effects going on in the game with any active hazards. Now, hazards are going to be associated with all of our away missions, and they will show the double black and yellow bar across the top, and there will be text that will happen to be on these threats. Now, some of these threats will be ongoing, like this one says players may not recruit heroes period until this away mission has been handled. Some of these away missions will do things such as this one right here, which says draw a threat detected card, which means we may be drawing more threats, especially if we have multiple of these cards in play, because this is going to happen after the threats detected. The two we draw just for normal gameplay. So if we have enough of these in play, you can see these hazards are going to start piling up because there are multiple of these hazards, and they'd be well, they'd be a pretty big challenge for our heroes, and they can keep piling up. So make sure we're staying on top of those away missions because they can start becoming a huge thorn in our side. And remember, like I said multiple times, if there's ever 5 away missions on any one single planet, we immediately lose the game. After we take care of the hazards, we're going to start the new round back at phase number 1 during our planning phase, where all of our players get to take 2 actions. We'll go back to the encounter phase, and then we're going to go to the final phase again, and we're going to keep doing that until either our heroes win the game by defeating the final fleet of the enemy federation, or our heroes suffer ultimate defeat. Now, once the players manage to find the 2 data chips through the completed distrust beacons, they need to head to the section of the game rulebook on page 18, which is going to tell them exactly which enemy federation they are going to have to encounter. I don't want to pull that out because it's kind of cool to see the different endings. There are multiple endings for this game. Some of these endings are your typical things that you may anticipate from a space combat game. Some of these endings you may not actually anticipate, and they're going to kind of change the way the gameplay is going to play. Not getting too spoilery, but it may not be a cooperative game anymore. Again, it depends on which ending you may have to encounter when it gets to that point. Additionally, trying to avoid spoilers, there are a couple more away missions that do have special rules. They're going to be on page 27 of the rulebook. Again, I don't want to pull out the spoilers, just understand there are a couple that happen to be there. When they do pop up, make sure you check out page 27 of the rulebook. It'll direct you to go there, so it's not a big deal at all. So the only thing left to cover at this point is the fact that we can do away missions and we can do combats as a team. We don't have to do this solo. Again, this is a cooperative game, so we ever happen to have 2 ships at a location, we can do a cooperative fleet combat, and we can also do a cooperative away mission. The only thing to understand, though, is that if this player helps this player on an away mission or a combat, that is also part of that player's turn. So you can't help another player and then also take an action. If you're helping another player, that is part of their activation, and it's also your activation. So even though you're working together, you're basically, in a way, sacrificing your turn. So when we're doing a team combat, the thing we're going to do is we're going to designate one player who's going to be the front line, and that player is going to be given the front line badge to signify that they are the front line player for this combat. The front line badge looks just like this, and the players on the front line will need this symbol to switch, and the players on the back line will need this symbol to switch. Now, we can switch back and forth as our ships go ahead and take damage, because when it comes to damage during the fleet combats with a group of players attacking a fleet, only the frontline player takes damage, but the front and the backline players are going to be attacking the enemy fleets. So you can, on your turn, do actions to go ahead and switch from the backline to the front line to prevent one of your co-pilot ships, your co-heroes, from being defeated. So the front line, like I said, takes all the damage as a primary target for the fleet attacks. Combat is pretty much the exact same way as your standard combat, except during phase 1, a player can swap front line using this tactic swap card. And again, all we need to do is we just need to roll the gear symbols. We're all going to contribute to our attacks and effects. All the players are going to roll their dice and assign their dice to their own ship as normal, resolving dice as plays. Phase 2 of the combat frontline ships takes all fleet damage effects unless an area effect attack occurs, and it's going to hit all of our player ships, so we need to be very, very careful of that. Any ship can use the escape combat command, which allows all of our hero ships to go ahead and escape the combat itself. If any ship is defeated, it is immediately removed from the combat, and if it was the frontline ship, as it should be, again, area attacks can attack other ones, but generally speaking, it's going to be the frontline ship that is going to be defeated. But if the frontline ship is defeated, they're going to hand their frontline ship to another one of the ships still involved in the combat. Once we complete the combat, if we manage to complete the combat without suffering complete defeat, we're going to split the rewards as the players like. We're not going to compile the rewards. We're going to split them as the normal awards would happen. So if there happened to be 4 credits was the award, these 2 ships were in the combat, they would award the 4 credits among themselves however they decide. The only thing left to explain is going to be the team away missions. And again, team away missions are very similar to your standard away mission. All the players on the team roll their dice and assign them to the mission sections as they normally would. Each player resolves the try again section individually. No medics can help another player. So for example, if we have these two players in a team away mission, this player rolls her dice, and let's get a medic roll right there. And this player rolled their dice and didn't get any medic symbols. I cannot use this player's medic symbol to help them re-roll all their dice. Your medic symbols are for your own crew only, no sharing them back and forth. Players are basically going to win or fail as a team. Players in a team choose how to split their rewards for success, just as your standard normal combat. All players in a team take any possible hull damage if there's a fail, so you got to be very, very careful about that. Some of these cards like this will be 2 hull damage to both of our heroes. And then at the end of the combat, all the individual crews are going to return to the individual players. So if this happened to be the away mission we were working on, and this player used this die for this, and this player happened to use this die for this, and this die for this, and this player happened to use this die for, I will find it, I swear I will. Let's say we use this die for this right here. This player would get this dice back, and this player would get their dice back. You get your crew members back. That is a complete tutorial for Deep Space D-6 Armada. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I will definitely get to them as quickly as I can. You'd also feel free to email me at offtheshelfboardgamereviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll definitely answer your email as quickly as I can. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy the content I put out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Patreon.com/otsbgr. This channel is 100% self-funded. All these games are purchased out of my own pocketbook or from the generosity of some of my friends. For example, this is actually a game I don't own. I'm borrowing this from a friend of mine, but they definitely purchased this game at the full retail price. We don't have the luxury of sponsorship. We don't have the luxury of free games from publishers. All this content is brought out there from my own pocketbook and from the pocketbook of my friends. You can help me cover my costs by just tossing $1 in the tip jar over on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching. So the first thing you need to do is when you're playing Deep Space, okay, buck.